All right, welcome today. We have a very exciting interview with a gentleman from Hershey, Pennsylvania. I'd like to introduce Bill Simpson. Bill is the president and CEO of Hershey Entertainment Resorts, which is a premier entertainment and hospitality company in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Bill has over 20 years with Hershey Entertainment Resorts and also over 4 decades of experience in the hospitality and service industry. Now, Bill began his career in Hershey in 1996 as general manager of the beautiful Hershey Lodge and Convention Center. And then he moved through numerous management and executive positions until he was named CEO in January of 13, which he's led the company to record growth and strong results over the past 4 years. Now, recently, Bill has announced his retirement from Hershey Entertainment Resorts effective January 5th, 2018. And fortunately, while Bill was Chief Operating Officer in 2010 through 12, I was fortunate to serve as his interim CFO under his incredible leadership. So with that, welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be part of this.
Well, we're going to get right into it. We have a list of about 10 questions we want to kind of talk to Bill about, and hopefully my students will get some benefit from some discussions we've had over the last 5 weeks of my course as well. So first of all, Bill, if you could, tell my students just a little bit about your current role with Hershey, as well as your primary responsibilities in that role.
So as CEO of the company, Greg, I spend most of my time serving as a liaison between the trust, who is our owner, our board of directors, and senior management. And what I do in those activities is make sure that the strategies that we're trying to execute are consistent with the owner's expectations. As you know, we do get from time to time updated owner's expectations, which basically set benchmarks or metrics that we need to try to hit as their investment. So we develop strategies based on a lot of things, including economic factors, to say, how do we grow this business? How do we pay the dividend to the Milton Hershey School that we need to pay? How do we set strategy for the future of the company? How do we continue to work on succession planning, making sure that we have the right talent levels, and are we prepared for the future?
Well, that's actually perfect. And just for my students' background, Hershey Entertainment Resorts is a privately held company, as Bill mentioned, from the Hershey Trust. But for my students' background, it's not all that different from what we've talked about with public companies. There's still a kind of somebody you have to answer to in the case of shareholders. In the case of Hershey Entertainment Resorts, it is the Milton Hershey Trust.
And as we get further into this, Greg, I mean, as you well know, I mean, we treat ourselves from a financial standpoint very much like a publicly traded company. I mean, we hold ourselves to the standards of Sarbanes-Oxley very, very closely.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, Bill. And that kind of gets me into my next question, speaking about accounting. With your impressive background of over 40 years in the industry, how much did you value your chief financial officer, your division controller, as well as any other accounting and finance personnel throughout your career?
Well, my very first GM's job was about 26 years ago. And I got to tell you that even back then, I relied very heavily on our controller. They control the scorecard. I'm an operations person. As I've been told by our current corporate controller, I know enough about finance to be dangerous. I think you've heard her make that comment to me. So clearly, I lean heavily on the financial advice, and I've been very blessed throughout my career to have great financial people supporting me. And the way I look at it, all the relationships with all the vice presidents are very important. But the key relationship and the person I look to as my wing person is that controller, the CFO, the financial leader. It's vitally important that we're on the same page because, they read the pulse of the organization.
Right, that's perfect. I mean, hopefully some of the students that are listening to this today will be future CFOs and division controllers as well. Our next question is, we just learned in our most recent discussions in class that the CEO actually has to sign a document as part of the audit financial statements, as part of the new Sarbanes-Oxley rules from years ago, that the accuracy of the financials is the responsibility of management. So I'm just curious, what runs through your mind before you sign that document, such as, boy, I hope our accounting department knows what they're doing, and secondarily, how do I look in stripes?
Or orange, right? So yeah, any of those colors. I go back to what I said earlier. I'm so blessed with having such a great finance team. I don't really think much about it. I mean, when we sit down with the external auditors, I sit here with our CFO, and the external audit first question they want to ask is around fraud. Do you know of anything about fraud? Have any any suspicions about any kind of fraud taking place? And I clearly I don't know of any. Right. Now that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and I'm sure we may get to that at some point. But I feel completely comfortable. Now, you have to. I can't even tell you how many hours of dialogue I have with people in finance throughout the week. I mean, it's not like it's a continuous touch point.
Sure.
So I'm completely comfortable with what they're doing, what they're seeing, the things that happen, and I mean that dialogue's ongoing. And I think that's vitally important to a leader of anything.
Right.
That you've got to have that kind of relationship with your finance people.
I think that's well said. Well, you mentioned fraud. I'm going to jump ahead to a question here. In our course, actually just in the most recent week, we've talked about ethics and fraud concepts in class. Like most companies, I understand that Hershey Entertainment has encountered some fraud issues over the past 6 years or so. What were your impressions at the time when those various fraudulent activities were discovered?
Thinking you have good controls is not ever good enough. And that's where enterprise risk management comes in. You've got to identify those areas at risk. You've got to set up procedures to make sure that they're avoided. And you've got to audit. Because there's always a workaround of a system. And so if you're not reviewing those systems and those controls on a regular basis, then you're exposed. And I can tell you, I've worked several companies, and invariably something like this happens. It's always the people you least expect.
That's very true. Yeah, we've actually talked about some of the examples I've encountered in my career, as well as some of the things we've seen here in the Midwest, which, to your point, would probably be the person you would least suspect is the one that comes in the fraudulent activity.
Well, I can tell you that, in the last 4 years, we have really ramped up our enterprise risk management activities, and I feel much better about a lot of those things just because of how strong our audit team is now.
Great.
We're going to continue to look at those things, and the great news is those people throughout the organization don't know when those audits are coming. They're not announced, and so hopefully, I don't know that you can ever control it or stop it, but I think you can take a very proactive, aggressive approach toward it.
No, I think that's a great approach. That helps to mitigate some of that risk, at least, that you do encounter. Let me jump back one. Just in our recent course discussions, we talked about that there's a lot of differences in the uses of financial statements. How important do you feel it is for Hershey's financials that they're accurate for your readers, which of course are your owner, the Hershey Trust, as well as kind of your partners, your creditors, the bankers?
Oh, it's vitally important. I mean, that's your credibility to your outside sources. And so if you, heaven forbid, if you had to go back and restate a financial statement or P&L, that's a problem. In fact, when it comes to our credit facility, we're very lucky in that there's complete confidence in our financial statements and in the integrity of our company. So it makes things easier. Those are problems that you can avoid and you don't want to have in the first place.
Gotcha. Great. Well, I'm going to move on to the second set of questions now, Bill. These are a little bit easier, so we'll take a little of the pressure off. But the sixth one here is, you announced your retirement, and it's certainly been well-deserved. But what will you miss most about Hershey when you retire in January 18? Of course, other than working with me in the past.
I've been missing that for years already, so I'm kind of getting broken into the idea of it. But not to make light of it, it's the people. You develop relationships with folks, and you've gone to war with people, and you've won and you've lost and you've been frustrated and you've had great success, and you're going to miss that camaraderie, and there's no way to replace that.
I think you hit a key point for me. When I retired in January of 14, everybody says, what do you miss the most? And I honestly don't miss the day-to-day work because I've been very excited about my academic endeavors here at Illinois, but it is the people. I mean, the people as you said, you kind of work in the trenches with day in, day out. Some it's positive, some it's not so positive.
Sure.
But those are life-changing experiences that's hard to leave, quite honestly, when you do step down.
Well, it makes people uncomfortable to say, the term love at work, but love is a verb. And I love this team. I mean, we've done some great things, and I feel very proud of what we've collectively accomplished. We've had, as you mentioned, 4 record years. I expect this year to be another record year. That doesn't happen because of any one person. That happens because we all have alignment. We're all trying to do the same things.
That's perfect. So as you look back on your career of now basically 4 decades, I have 2 reflection questions for you. One
Right.
is, do you think that your college education prepared you well for your career and why? And then secondarily, what areas do you think may have been improved in that process?
I think it did a pretty good job to prepare me. However, there probably were some blind spots that I didn't know about until I started working. There wasn't time spent on working effectively with teams, being a contributor, becoming a person of influence. You almost leave college being well prepared to be an individual contributor. But I don't know of many roles that you're going to find yourself in where you just work alone in a room by yourself.
Right, right.
And so I think from a college standpoint, becoming well socialized, being members of groups and committees and clubs, and learning how to work well with people that you like a lot and maybe some you don't like so much,
Sure.
and learning how to navigate life beyond just academics is vitally important.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I can piggyback off that. I do something in my live classrooms, or in the first day of class, I offer a one-on-one coffee chat. And quite honestly, as I tell the students who take me up on that free coffee, I only buy one because I'm not paid that much here, but it's funny. I tell students, and they don't realize this, a lot of their learning that's going to be useful in their career comes outside the classroom, to your
Absolutely.
point. So
I totally agree.
I think that's where a lot of learning can occur if you let it happen.
And it's a weird thing because, as a student, the learning is up to you. I mean,
Right.
yes, you may have some study partners or study groups or that sort of thing, but ultimately your success or failure is left up to you. But if you ignore all the other social interaction in favor of that, you're probably costing yourself some valuable experience.
Yep, perfect. So based on that last answer, what areas would you suggest that my ACCE 501 students work on to improve their future career success in today's very fast-paced, very much data-filled business world that we live in?
I still think you've got to find a way to be involved with other people. And hopefully it's involvement in something that there's a sense of accomplishment, that you work toward a common goal, that you learn how to lead or follow or both outside the classroom. I just think to be well equipped, you need to do that.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's a good answer because today we're so much tied to these things. It's kind
Absolutely.
of crazy. But as you stress, and I love to hear this when I share it with my students, people need to realize there's more than just that little box in their hand. You can actually go talk to somebody live and probably learn a lot more in a couple of minutes than you could over the texting of the phone.
We just had a breakfast meeting with one of the local school districts and their superintendent. And his question was, what do we need to do to prepare high school students for internships, for college, and even if they're coming into the workforce right out of high school? And we were broken up into 8 different tables.
Wow.
And everybody had to answer, they had a note taker. Everyone said social skills,
Yeah.
interact, and get away from the phone.
I just think that's one of those things that a lot of our students today kind of take for granted. They don't have to worry about that in today's technology, but it's just a crucial feature of success in this business world even today.
And how many of us had said something over the phone via text or email we would never say to someone in person?
Yeah, you're right. We've all done that, unfortunately.
We've all done that. And so one of these days, you're going to have to say it in person. So you should start practicing now.
So this might echo off the last couple of questions, Bill, but my next question is, if you had to provide my students just one key piece of advice or for future success in this field, I mean, accounting's kind of that, everybody thinks that as the green shades back in the office kind of role, but a lot of my students may just go into business in general, right? Not just specifically accounting. So what would that one piece of advice be for them?
I think internships,
Yeah.
co-ops, getting yourself some practical experience is really, really important. If you don't do that, you're going to be at a disadvantage right off the bat against those people that do it. And so, and even if an internship is required, and I know a lot of schools now do that, don't just settle for one just to check the box.
Right, right.
Because the more work experience you can get and the greater immersion you can get into that workplace, it's going to feel more natural and you're going to be more at ease when you actually do join the workforce.
Yeah, I actually love that answer because I tell a lot of my students who I meet on the coffee chats that until you've done an internship, how do you really know if you're right for that field, right? So
Right.
I'd rather have you test it in a 2-3 month internship than when you come out and graduate. So
I
I
think
love
that's
your answer
true.
on internship.
How many people do that and then go, oh my gosh, maybe I should change my major. This is
I
not
don't
what
want to
thought
do
it
that,
was.
right?
Yeah.
We're going to end up a couple of fun questions and then we'll
Okay.
wrap this up here. So when you sit in those riveting audit committee meetings with the board of directors and your outside audit firm members, from one of the big 4 firms, et cetera, what's your favorite part of that meeting?
when it's over.
That is oh so true. And I think even when I was corporate controller, that was my favorite part, quite honestly.
You know,
Perfect.
I've obviously sat through a few of those, and I'm very proud to say I've never been surprised in one.
Okay.
So I think, having a great relationship with the auditors in terms of
Right.
providing them the materials when they want it, being responsive, providing good explanations when they have questions, and they're going to have questions, that earning their confidence
Right.
certainly then ends up with a good result in the boardroom when they're going over their results.
No, that's perfect. And hopefully some of my students in this ACCI 501 class will either be sitting in that boardroom as board members or probably more likely on the audit committee side of the
Yeah.
big four firms. So that's helpful advice. Lastly, and I'll end up with this one a little bit lighthearted. So have you seen the movie The Accountant with Ben Affleck? And if so, does it really make you want to join our cool professional accounting after you step down in January 18?
Well, I haven't seen the movie. I'm not much of a movie goer, but I couldn't use any of our accounting people as references. It allow me to get in the accounting field, so I better figure out something else to do.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, thanks, Bill. Thank you for your time, as I really appreciate your time spent with our students. I know that our students will benefit greatly from our discussions today.
Thanks, Greg. It was a pleasure. It's great to see you.
Wish you well, and I hope you guys have a great summer season coming up.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Take care.
All right.